Hello again. In this video, I'm going to share some ideas with you about self-care. As I mentioned in the previous video, self-care is going to be a really important part of what you do, what I suggest for you to build skillful relationships and use them as interventions in the ways you deal with children and adolescents you work with. So I'm going to emphasize this throughout these series of videos to kind of turn toward yourself, to pay attention to how you take care of yourself, as the kind of trickle down does tend to affect students in the ways that you might be taking care of yourself, and modeling that to them so that they begin to take care of themselves in similar ways, or at least are influenced by the happiness you produce in your own life, and how that sense of wholeness or happiness or fulfillment that they may glean from you actually influences their academic success. So it's almost like a responsibility. You have the right to, of course, take care of yourself and make sure you feel as whole as you can. Doing your best to avoid burnout and undue stress, as hard as that may be. But it's also could be considered a responsibility of yours to take care of the equipment that does the job of teaching. That seems to me to be a really essential thing. You know, when they go through the safety steps, when you get on an airplane, for instance, they always tell parents, if something goes wrong and oxygen masks come down, make sure to give it to yourself first. Make sure to take care of yourself first. If you don't, then you can't take care of anyone else. And I tend to wonder if there's a lot of eye rolling going on when that happens. Like, yeah, I'm not going to take care of my kid first. What do you mean? But it's really about using yourself as the instrument of education and making sure that that instrument is taken care of. So what I'll suggest to you in this video is a couple of ways of beginning to sort of train yourself to do that, and hopefully maybe new ways. It does seem to be the case that there's evidence for what I'm suggesting here, that modeling happiness in the classroom actually influences students' sense of happiness in themselves, and their happiness positively influences their GPA, or their general sense of development in the classroom. And what I'm going to share with you are ways to what I think of as optimizing your attentional effort. It kind of means getting more bang for your buck. In other words, using your attention in specific skillful ways to get more out of the moment, and for yourself and for those that you're working with. So today I'm going to suggest a few ways of dealing with stress, kind of stress prevention or stress reduction, and then a couple of exercises, specific attentional or mental exercises that seem to be really good for us to do to take care of ourselves, to optimize our attentional efforts, as I've mentioned. And I always try to make what I think of as a panacea disclaimer, making sure that it's clear that I don't believe that if you just do these things, all your life problems will go away. In fact, it's more so that what I'm suggesting are different ways of meeting those problems in such a way that they become more manageable and you become more resilient in the face of them. So with stress prevention or stress reduction, I think of the acronym IDEAS, I-D-E-A-S. And so the I is intention, setting your intention to take care of yourself, making sure it's something that you bring to mind and that you do purposefully. D refers to diet and nutrition, just paying attention to what goes into your body. E is do things, exercise, kind of routine exercise if you can, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, or 10 minutes 3 times a week, or whatever, going for a walk, anything. And also self-education. To me, that means that you kind of dive into some of your passions or dive into interests that you like to learn about that are maybe separate from your workday. Things that you are building within your own knowledge set or your own interest range, things you really like to do and like to learn about. A is acts of kindness. Acts of kindness without any expectation of reward seems to be really highly correlated with a sense of fulfillment in life. It feels good, in other words, to do good things. But it also points to attentional training or attentional exercise. And we'll talk more about this as we go, but training or working with your attention to develop skillful qualities of attention really seems to be important in the ways that we meet the world and we meet our own thoughts and emotions as we go throughout the world. And I'll share with you even today a couple of ways to begin doing that. And it asks for first to sleep and social, getting the right amount of quality sleep for you, and having a social network of connection and using that connection to help build yourself up, to feel nurtured and a part and a sense of belonging in your family or a friend group and what have you. And it's a little different nowadays, of course, being much more distant or virtual than we maybe normally are, but there are still ways to make contact and stay in contact with others in kind of fulfilling ways. So using specific exercises can be a challenging thing to begin to do. And so as I share some things with you, it may feel like just one more thing on the list, on the to-do list. But what I'd encourage you to consider is committing to something of a new habit for something like a week or 2 weeks is pretty manageable in most people's lives. And what I mean by that is a 5 or 10 minute period a day. And 10 minutes feels like maybe a long time to sit down and do something like this, but it's really quite manageable. Right when you wake up, right when you go to sleep, certain breaks during the day, however short they may and fleeting they may be. But during those times, what I'd suggest is that you try to intentionally build in certain exercises or habits to promote some of these skills of self-care. And what I'd like to suggest is to think of them as practices or skills of mindfulness. And what mindfulness really means in my mind is the ability and the willingness to pay attention to or to be in direct contact with what's actually going on in a moment of experience throughout the day, using that again and again to stay in contact fully and completely as you can with what's actually going on, with the stuff going on around you, but also within you and your thoughts, memories, plans, emotions, and so on. And so why we might do this is to cultivate certain habits or skills of attention, being able to pay attention with certain qualities to whatever happens to be going on. And so I'm going to share with you 2 practices, and practice is the real right word for this, I think, because as we learn skills, especially skills of attention, it does require skillful repetition. We have to build it into ourselves as habit, and the way we do that is through practice. And so practice, the first practice I'll share is what I think of as 5 and 10 breathing. 5 and 10 breathing is a way to kind of tap into your nervous system in the way that it naturally behaves, but kind of sculpt it in a way that's preferred. So especially in a moment when you're feeling very anxious or when you're feeling overwhelmed, which might be somewhat frequent, using the breath to actually change the rate of your heartbeat is something we can actually do. Our heart rate's not something we normally think we have control over, and we don't have as direct control over it, but our lungs kind of tell our heart how fast to beat. Each time we breathe in, it speeds up a little bit, and each time we breathe out, our heart slows down just a little bit. So if we spend more time breathing out than breathing in, while continuing to get full and deep breaths, gradually our heart rate can lower. And when that happens, we can feel more relaxed, we can feel more at ease, we can feel more in control, more clear. So what I'd invite you to try to do is, maybe on a daily basis for a little while, sit down with the sole intention of practicing this simple exercise. And then also use it as a tool in interactions where you feel triggered or anxious during the day. So all 5 and 10 breathing is making sure you breathe deeply and slowly, and breathe in for the duration of 5 seconds, and then breathe out completely for the duration of 10 seconds. And do that 3 to 5 breaths in a row, and maybe even longer, 7 to 10 breaths in a row. And I really often encourage people to try this right before they go to bed. It helps relax, it helps induce sleep a little bit, and also, as I mentioned, throughout the day when you feel kind of anxious or triggered by something. So simply breathing in slowly and kind of counting in your head for the duration of 5 seconds as you breathe in. And when you get to 5, your lungs will be totally full. And then turn and let the air empty out of you in half that speed. Okay, so you slow the breath down even more and count the duration of 10 seconds so that when you get to 10, you're completely emptied out of air. Okay, so I'd encourage you to try that, maybe even right now with me on during this video. There's always going to be distractions, like there's some voices out in the hallway where I'm recording this right now. And what I encourage you to do is just let all of that be in the background. That's kind of like part of the skill, is letting things go when you're focusing on something that's going on that you're more intentional about. So that's building skills of mindfulness simply in that fact. But do this with me maybe just for 2 full breaths, just to kind of get the flavor of it. Breathing in for the duration of 5 seconds, breathing out for the duration of 10 seconds. Do that for 2 full breaths, letting everything else be in the background. Okay, let's try that for a moment right now. Okay, so we're probably ending at around the same time. Try to maintain a second as something like 1,000, do 1,000. And you'll have to work with it a little bit to get kind of coordinated in that timing. But try it on your own throughout the day. And like I said, maybe one time of the day between 5 and 10 full breaths in a row, and just to see what it feels like. Kind of checking in with the body, checking in with how clear your mind feels before and after, to see what it feels like as you do that. Now, as we did that, there were still sounds going on around us, and probably a lot of thoughts coming up in your mind, maybe even about what we're doing right now. All of that is a part of these practices. These practices are about intentionally setting your attention towards some activity of mind or something that you can focus on, and letting distractions that tug at your attention be in the background. Okay, so this is important because this means that anywhere we are, whatever's going on, we always have the opportunity to practice these things. We don't have to be in a quiet, secluded place, although sometimes that's nice and helpful. And the second practice I'll suggest today actually has a lot to do with what sounds go on around us. This practice we could think of as just here. It's kind of like that's the instruction and the description of what this is. We're just hearing, without adding any critique, without adding any analysis, without interpreting what we hear, without adding a lot of thought or emotional reactivity to what sounds we notice going on around us, just hearing. And let's try that, and we can try that just with 2 steps. Okay, so step 1 is simply notice what sounds are going on around you right now. Maybe sounds in the front, behind you, to either side, above you, or even below you. Just notice what sounds are going on right now. Okay? And step 2 is that was the practice. Okay? So all there is that simply noticing. And so the step 2 is not to add anything to that. Simply notice. And doing that can feel at first kind of pointless. It's like, okay, I hear those sounds all the time. What's the big deal? But that step 2, that not adding anything else, that simple noticing is the practice. That's the real important thing. It's not adding critical thought, not adding judgment, not adding swirling story around what we hear, not adding interpretation, not trying to figure out where the sound comes from or who it was or what it means. Just pay attention to the sounds, simply as they are. And practicing this on a daily basis for some can feel quite soothing, can kind of tap you into where you are in the space around you, and it can feel quite grounding, quite stable, and quite nice. As we go through other types of exercises, maybe you'll find something that feels a little more natural to you, but maybe this could be something that you experiment with for a while and see if it's comfortable for you. It's something you can rely on and use throughout your day to kind of feel more settled, to feel more stable, to feel more clear.